Hello everybody, welcome to our webinar, and today we talk about how to evaluate an ecosystem as a startup. And I'm very proud that today we have Vladimir De Franceschi with us. So he's a very experienced person. He's based in Silicon Valley but travels a lot to Europe as well. So has an understanding of both startup ecosystems also. He's an attorney, he was a founder, and he's mentored a lot of startups, so he is actually a lot of experience and I think also a lot of interesting insights he can share with us. So it's very great having you with us, Vladimir, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. Good afternoon, everyone. What I wanted to do is just give you, that was a generous introduction, thank you. Just give you a little bit of my background so that you understand the perspective that you'll hear, from where you'll hear my input, because of course there's a big difference, first off, between answering this question for today in a large company context or established company context, and in a young or startup company context. So my background is purely, I have been at Sony Electronics before I became a lawyer, which is where I fell in love with technology and business and entrepreneurship, but then ended up going to Stanford Law School and was fortunate to discover that you could be a lawyer for startups, and that I didn't have to give up being in touch with the business side. So I've got a little, after having some big company experience, and this was in strategic planning, I've been working for maybe the last, well, whatever it's been now, 15 years with startups, helped start a few, was CEO of one, VP of business development of actually a European startup that I wanted to help bring to Silicon Valley. So my point is that, again, I will speak mostly from the young company, which means at the very early stages view, or the point of view you should have, and the methodology to use to figure out, what is your market and what does that mean for your business. And the last point I just want to make is, of course, at that stage, even more so than, of course, at a later company stage, market analysis is very intimately tied with both with your sales strategy, and with your product design and features. So let's get started. So the two approaches to understanding your marketplace, right, are top down and bottom up. So I'm just sharing with you here the two concepts, the total addressable market, and here they're calling it your segmented addressable market, when you're doing a top-down analysis. So it's a good starting point, and I'm sure that it comes intuitive, and many of you have already thought about it. Let's use a living example. I was thinking, what would be something? Say we want to get into the business of ride sharing cars. So here in the U.S., the most well-known company is Zipcar, where people can share a car or use a car for the day. They avoid owning a car. They avoid having to to go to a rental place and go through all the painful logistics of renting a car once at a time. You can sign up for a service, pick up a car from a designated place, and use it for the time they need. So in this context, we would think, what would be, if you were going to start this business, you'd ask yourself, well, what's the total addressable market? And that you look at, so again, let me just say this, there's a bit of a difference, of course, with the fact that if you're say if you're Europe, it is a large internal market inside the EU, but certainly it's fragmented because you've got different national laws, different languages. So a lot of this stuff that you will find in resources you'll find on the web, certainly, and what you'll hear people out of Silicon Valley speak about, are in the context of a U.S. market, which is, again, a total population of 300 million, the most affluent consumer market, and it's very large in every dimension, and it's all subject to the same currency, same legal regime, and so on. So if you're measuring the total addressable market for ride-sharing services in the United States, you could easily say, oh, okay, well, let's say, what is the total population of people in the country that rent cars, that use public transportation, you would try to figure out some metric for what is the aggregate number of your potential customers. But then you want to slice it further down. What is the actual segment inside that total population that you can address with your service or want to address? What is applicable? So in this case, it might be, well, people who live in larger cities, because the pain you're addressing is more concentrated and a solution to it more meaningful in perhaps like in a place like New York City, San Francisco, where the cost of owning a car is very high and there's lots of friction and burden because you got to get parking spaces, and it's just in general nowhere to park even if you had your own at home, and there's lots of public transportation that doesn't make you not need a car except for a few occasions. So now you've zeroed down to, again, a narrower piece of the total potential market. And then your last layer of analysis is, well, what is my actual market share of that market? What is it that I could, with what I'm planning to build and with the resources I can access, what can I actually address? And of course, your competitors are going to play into that evaluation, because if there are competitors, you've got to account for their participation in that same market. So the one thing worth saying is, when you're looking at this, if you find competitors, you should, basically, because both from experience and conceptually, whenever you're starting a new idea, you've got to expect that there are at least 10 teams, certainly around the world, but if we just focus here in Silicon Valley, there are at least 10 teams solving the same problem, because everyone is using the same sort of analysis and thinking and spotting the same opportunities in the marketplace. So it's natural that there will be others who are going to try to address this problem. So if you see other young companies, or startup stage companies in the space offering solutions, that's not fatal. It's validation that you're on the track of a genuine opportunity, and you should be more worried if you see no one doing it, because then you definitely want to test your assumptions to make sure you're not missing something, that there isn't some really big reason out there something can't be done, that it's not doable. It could be restriction in the laws, it could be just that the customer behavior isn't there, it could be that the pain is not big enough, and so even though your solution might solve something, nobody would care or pay you enough for it to do it. Excuse me. And of course, the type of competitor you want to be mindful of are large ones, right? Large established companies. And there occasionally startups get tempted by saying, okay, well, I could sort of get into these arbitrage businesses, meaning I could do something smarter than eBay. There are always exceptions to the rule, but the point is, large companies can always out-arbitrage you. They have huge marketing, and advertising budgets. They've got cash flow, deep pockets, and they can just starve you out, and they can always outcompete you on margin. So you definitely want to stay away from having to compete head-to-head, goes without saying, with a large customer. But in any event, you've got to take consideration of the competition. So let me just zip over and show you, as Stefan mentioned, I lead a chapter of the Founder Institute, and we and mentor startups both within the program and outside. But just to give you a view, this is a spreadsheet that we have our founders use in measuring their market. So we, at the very outset of the program, asked them to come up with 3 ideas or 3 projects for their startup, and asked them to go out and measure the market and basically answer the criteria that are here. Hopefully you can see them, but the point again is the same, that you're doing your top-down analysis, that you're identifying your competitors. The other smart thing is to figure out what are the leading resources, opinion leaders, conferences, gatherings where you can promote or sell the service you have. Where can you engage with your customer? So this would be this is an example of a helpful matrix to make for yourself. because I jumped a little bit ahead of it just to say that when you're doing this stuff, in a startup environment, you're creating hypotheses all along the way. And you're going to test your hypotheses, and this is what we're getting to, why I said it's intimately touches your product and your sales strategy and your customer. The only way you'll answer whether your hypotheses are true or false is if you engage with the customer. And you have to engage with the customer immediately, early on, and continuously in order to continue to validate your hypotheses. And then that's going to inform what your product offering should be. And let me just, before we proceed on that one, turn to, once you've gotten down to your actual share of market that you think you can address, you want to do an analysis of what it will cost you to address that market. So it can be very pragmatic. You can say to yourself, okay, well, I have 50,000 euros, and there's two of us. We can live on that for 6 months. And you figured out how you could go out and reach your customers and try to get your first set of people who would actually pay what you're building. And then figure out, okay, well, with 2 people, how many customers can I get? And start to get a feel for what is your cost of goods sold, what's your customer acquisition cost, and that then informs you, okay, like not only how many resources will I need and what methods I should use to try to reach my customer that are actually feasible, right? Whether it's having to raise money or having to reach enough customers with what you're able to bootstrap to get to some kind of cash flow so you can be self-sustaining. You then want to go back up to the top and see if, okay, given my resources and given the methods I will use to reach my customers, are there enough of them in that total addressable market and in the segmented addressable market in the target? Because you want to, of course, make sure that you're not chasing or something that where you can get 1,000 customers or 500 customers who will pay you, even if they can pay you, I don't know, $1,000 for the year. That's your total potential market, right? Because of your product and because of your strategy, you end up being able to address a much smaller piece of the total marketplace that hems in your business and messes with your financials. So let's go forward and just the way that you then want to start thinking about your market in more detail is to just go and directly go and engage the customer. Before you've built any product features, I shouldn't say any product features, but before you've built what you think the market needs in its totality, before you start focusing on features, you need to go talk to customers to see what it is that they really want and what it is they're really willing to pay. So again, you've done this top-down analysis, you've figured roughly about, okay, how I could go sell a product, what product I'll sell, and keep it simple. So one feature, meaning you identify one pain point, one customer, one solution, right, that's going to translate into like one product, one revenue stream. Because if you go in front of a customer with more than one offering, in other words, if you're asking them more than one question, like large conceptual question at a time, you'll both confuse them. And you'll get bad data because one question is going to be influencing the other. So if it makes sense, you want to keep things at the outset and all along the way. I mean, you should keep things as simple as you can and keep them stepwise. So before you've actually added new features to your product, after feature 1, you want to repeat the whole cycle and check with your customer, engage with your customer, and understand, is that a product or feature that they want. So let me find, this is our stuff, these are tools, something I'll recommend. There we go. No, come on. Apologize, guys. Where's my Steve Blank article? Here we go. Now, maybe just write down the article title, but this is a very good summary of the process to follow and the reasoning why when you're engaging with the customer and when you're defining your product. So the key thing about this, and I can tell you from my personal experiences, maybe give you a couple of examples. When I was with the European startup, in part by necessity, we had built a product very far along with a pretty broad feature set before being able to engage with the customer, because again, it was a company building something in Europe where its target market was in the US. So it was very hard to reach the customer, and this is years back where we didn't have the same tools we have today over the web and in the cloud. So my job was to go talk to customers and sell the product. But of course, you listen first before you try to sell anything, because you want to make sure that the product you're about to offer makes sense for them, right? You don't want to waste time, and also you want to find out if what you're selling is not the correct offering. What is it that your customer would want? What is their pain point? And we found, well, I found very early on that customers wanted, let's say, 1/10 of the features, meaning 1 out of the 10 features that were being offered. And because they were, let's say, the pitch required explaining 10 features, no way. Like I would lose people. I mean, they'd be patient and they'll listen through what you're offering, but you lose and confuse them after you've started adding, a second thing and a third thing, and hey, there's an amazing this you can do. You press this button and great things happen. No way. You've got to really address their core pain point. And so, what's my point? When you're going to engage with that first customer and you're doing this market analysis, few things. So you want to ask them, you want to really step into their shoes and understand what, like, their point of view in the world in the course of engaging with them. So you have to understand the pain that they have, like this, that you're trying to address. Is it a real pain? And ask them, why it is, why it's not. More, and one important thing to do is, and then when you describe your product that addresses that pain, the better strategy is to ask them why they wouldn't buy the product. What do they think is bad about that product? Why is it not a good fit for their solution? Or why is there something better out there? They think that there's something better out there. And keep in mind, something better out there also includes doing nothing. So part of your competition is that whatever pain exists, people are solving it somehow. And it might be that however they're doing it, even though you think it's stupid and yours is better and it would make their lives happier, your customer is going to have their own worldview, their own preference ordering. And in that, available time and money and whatever, sometimes the alternative of doing nothing or whatever is the current worst solution that what you're offering is good enough. So it means you're not addressing a pain that's deep enough for them, or your product solution is not compelling enough. And you need to know that. And if you ask them, would you buy my product, like in a positive way, hey, what do you think of what I'm making? People will be nice to you. You risk that they'll be just, kind, don't want to hurt your feelings, and they'll kind of tell you, yeah, we kind of use it because they just don't want to hurt your feelings, and they want to get rid of you. You get much better and accurate feedback if you present your product, but then ask them to challenge it, to share with you, tell them you're comfortable hearing a no, and you're trying to just understand why this wouldn't work. And through that, you're going to learn a lot more than if you're just asking people, indirectly asking them for praise. So again, this is what's going to, what I was saying is, it's going to influence your product design. It's going to influence the rest of your strategy, because in the course of this, you're going to find out from engaging with your actual final customer what it is that they would buy. You, of course, in the process want to find out how much will they pay. Will they actually pay anything? It's a key question you've got to ask them, because if you get, of course, no's to those answers, then you need to repeat the process. You go back to the drawing board and figure out, now that you've heard from customers what it is in your target market, what it is they would do, what they would or wouldn't pay for. You simply have to go back, adjust your hypotheses, and return to them a second time to get more customer feedback on a better iteration that you think fits what they want to do. But also be prepared that you might find something that the customers want something totally different that you are able to build, but it just my point is that's the best way you're going to find out what's actually going on in the market you're trying to address. And a lot of times, I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard, the mantra is that literally every startup and one that's successful becomes a successful company is doing something or solving a problem at least in a very different way from what they thought they were going to do on day one, or they're doing something very different from what they set out to do, because when they engage the market, engage the customer, it naturally mutated their product, or their company, their strategy, and so on. And the successful ones follow, right, that feedback they're getting. So again, going back to this example, saying with this company we're working with out of Spain, we were like doing things at the very early days of, like, you know, Google Maps, sort of GIS data being used by Google to create Google Maps and to kind of give you layers of information, so on top of a digital map. And what ended up being is that the customers, it was very new for everybody, and what the customers really wanted was the ability to make their own maps. Like, they just, it's inane. It's like stupid. You can just do that. You could do that inside Google Maps itself, right? You can just do capture a little bit of HTML code of a screenshot and of a particular map view, embed that in your website, and there you go. You have a map. But this is what people really wanted. They wanted to customize this, let's call it, you know, this generic mass market version that Google had made. They wanted to customize these maps for themselves and their websites. And we could totally do that. That was like the simplest thing to do. But it was completely different from what we were offering and completely different from what we expected that people wanted. And part of the company's challenge, of course, is its ability to respond to that. And that has to do with just, again, being aware of what we're talking about today, the methodology, being aware of this reality, and knowing that what you're building, you can't build in a vacuum. You've got to get out from behind your desk, and you've got to go talk to customers in the real world in order to build something that is going to succeed. And again, you may be surprised by what the customers tell you. They may be willing to pay you more for less. So to recap, I mean, there are tools that you can use. This is one of them on the web. So I mean, let me be systematic. So let's say for your total addressable market, there are, you know, in the US at least, you've got resources, research companies like Gartner and Forrester that do all kinds of market analysis by segment and all kinds of surveying that gives you what, you know, people in your potential market predict the future will be like, right, when it comes to like number of PCs shipped to number of mobile devices to this to that. Another great resource is, again, is your local government is going to have, it's doing its own analysis, particularly when it comes to human population changes, labor force population changes, and so on, that can be very informative. And most of this stuff costs money. The Forrester and Gartner type reports, usually you can get them 6 months after the fact. So when they create new data, when they publish, you know, data for a new cycle, usually the previous cycle gets published. And so at a minimum, you can get data that's 1 quarter or 2 quarters old on the web. But the other one is, again, you know, I don't know whatever is accessible, a university or just a public library, you can get, you know, try to leverage, just be creative and try to leverage, you know, other people who've already paid for access to this data to go get at it. And then for survey tools, you know, SurveyMonkey, of course, should be familiar to everyone. You could create digital surveys to ask people, again, to ask those key customer questions. But again, keep in mind that you need to be, the danger of using those is that you have to know a little bit about statistical survey design. And it's not easy because, as you can imagine, depending what question you ask, conditions what answer you're going to get. And it's not that obvious how to ask questions in a totally neutral way that you're getting unfiltered, unconditioned responses. But if you have some simple questions, maybe they have to do with pricing or who knows, some very simple questions, you could use those tools. This is another service that you can use through the web. Again, I don't know whether these services maybe have some analogs in Europe. I don't know how much data these guys collect that might be specifically relevant for your country. But that's as far as methodology. If you want, this is a great, you can see the URL. This is a great talk by a recent talk by a mentor. It'll show you, again, some of the methodology we use in our program. It'll say much the same. And again, the whole point of all of this is that it's repetitive. So you do your top-down analysis, match it up with your bottom-up analysis, talk to the customer, figure out will they, does your product matter to them, and if it doesn't, repeat. And there's no like shortcut to it, unfortunately. It's not fun, but that's the only way that you'll really understand what it is that will sell and how will it sell, who will buy it. What I like most about it, just to give you my final 2 cents, is that it's, well, it's scary because you don't want to talk to people and you don't want to hear people telling you that your idea is stupid and I don't think it's going to work. But to get past that fear, and you have to, it's fascinating. It's totally fascinating when you basically leverage, if you can talk to 50 people, 100 people firsthand, you're like accessing collectively like probably 200 years of experience in a particular industry, and they're going to be sharing with you. It's almost, I don't know, to me it's like just knowledge of judo. You're going to embrace all the things that they think, all the reasons they think your stuff won't work is this collective wisdom of having been in a particular marketplace, from which you can glean huge knowledge and insight. And basically you're leveraging, you don't have to go acquire 20 years of experience or 200 years of experience in a segment. You can just leverage that from conversation with people who have that deep knowledge. And it's super informative and just fascinating, like fascinating stuff that you learn. I mean, even when I was, the last example I can give you is when I decided that I want to have my own law firm. First thing I did is went out and talked to customers. I would go talk to CEOs of the types of companies that I would go ask to hire me, and would ask them the same types of questions. Would you, if I built a firm, and of course at the beginning you're small, it's like maybe 1, 2, 3 people. Like, would you hire us? Does it matter? Does our size matter? Does it matter what we know, how we do it? Does it matter how much we charge? And in the end, it was obvious that at least in this business, it's very, what's the word? In a way, it's very referral based. So what people want to hire is you, that specific person. It's not, what are your, I don't know, what is your, technology capability, how many people you have, because you can't lie to the customer. The customer is going to see who you are, what you can offer, what your potential is, right? What are your own limitations? And by talking to them, that's, like I said, for me it was super useful just to find out that actually all of the things that I thought were going to be negatives and would keep us from entering the market didn't matter at all. And they, customers then pointed out to you exactly what are your strengths, and then to sell to those strengths. So when you engage with a customer, you're not, in our case, we don't, we're not going to try to pretend that we are some big 1,000-person law firm that's all over the world, or that we are the, authoritative, knowledge leaders in some certain disciplines. We have a very different set of skills and competences that are equally important. And then again, this is what you sell, and you learn what kind of customer needs that type of, in our case, service, which if we just did it in the abstract, following what every other big operation does, would have totally missed the boat. All right, again, I hope that, I'll wrap it up there. I hope that it makes sense. If you, I don't know, Stefan, if you share my email with folks, you're more than welcome to email me to ask about these links and resources.
Sure.
if they were hard to see on the screen.